My name is Lincoln, and my life until recently was utterly everyday. I'm a final-year university student living in a dorm and trying to juggle my studies with a part-time job at a local coffee shop. Nothing special, you might say, and you'd be right. At least, that was until one incident turned everything upside down. I've been rooming with Brian for 3 years now. We met in our first year when assigned to the same room. I remember the first time I saw him, a tall, athletic guy with a permanent grin and a shock of red hair that constantly touzles when he's nervous. He's a swimmer, and it's noticeable in his figure, broad shoulders and a fit body. However, I noticed it only with envy at the time because I was more into video games and books. Our friendship began with a silly joke. During our first week together, Brian decided to ease the tension by snapping a towel at me as I came out of the shower. I returned the favor and hid all his socks the next day. And so it went. We constantly made fun of each other but never crossed the line. Over time, these jokes became our thing. Snapping towels, tripping each other up, and unexpectedly dousing each other with water became a ritual. The other guys in the dorm were often surprised that we didn't get on each other's nerves, but we had fun. After all, what could be better than a friend with whom you can laugh and talk heart to heart? Our dorm room is small but cozy. 2 beds on opposite walls, desks by the window, a closet that is always filled with our stuff, and bookshelves where my textbooks sit next to Brian's sports magazines. The walls are covered with superhero posters, mine, and photos of swimmers, his. It's a typical college den, where every corner holds a story. We got along great together. I cooked, because Brian can only do so much without burning an egg, and he kept order. I always had problems with that. I helped him with his studies, and he protected me from idiots who liked to bully nerds. It was the perfect tandem, as they say. None of us could have imagined that one day everything would change, that a simple cleaning of the room would lead to such consequences, that our harmless jokes and teasing would turn out to be something more, that one day could have such a strong impact on our friendship. But first things first. That day started as usual. Brian went to his morning workout and I decided to tidy the room. Who knew this simple idea would turn into such an unexpected turn in our relationship? It was a typical Saturday afternoon. Brian, as usual, went to his morning workout, and I decided to use this time usefully. Our room needed cleaning. Dust had accumulated everywhere, especially under the beds, where we usually stuffed everything that did not fit in the closet. I put on my most basic cleaning clothes, old shorts and a stretched-out t-shirt. I turned on some music in my headphones and got to work. I started with the surfaces, wiping down tables, putting away books, and picking up scattered things. Everything was going well until I got to the space under the beds. The dorm beds are heavy metal with spring mattresses. We usually don't move them, just wipe them down next to each other. But today, I decided to do a full cleaning. I found a thick book on economics. I hope the professor never finds out how I used his textbook, and put it under the edge of the bed to lift it up and vacuum it underneath. Things started to go wrong when I crawled halfway under the bed, trying to get a box that had rolled against the wall. At that moment, the book that was propping up the bed slipped. The heavy metal structure came down, pinning me to the floor. Not painfully, but firmly enough that I couldn't get out. For the first few minutes, I tried to cope on my own. I writhed and tried to lift the bed, to no avail. The phone remained on the table, out of reach. The music in the headphones was still playing, creating a surreal background for my unenviable situation. Well done, Lincoln, I thought. Just well done. Getting stuck under a bed is a new clumsy level even for you. Time dragged on painfully slowly. I didn't know how much had passed. Maybe half an hour, maybe more. My arms started to numb, and the position was highly uncomfortable. I already imagined how I would spend the whole day like this until someone returned. And then I heard the sound of the door opening. Never in my life have I been so glad to see Brian back from practice. He walked into the room whistling a tune but quickly fell silent, clearly noticing my absence and the mess in the room. "Lincoln?" he called. "Here under the bed," I replied, blushing with shame. "A bit of a cleaning problem." I heard his footsteps and saw his sneakers stop next to the bed. There was a pause, and then his laughter, not angry or mocking, but that familiar one with a hint of warmth, which for some reason made my heart beat faster. "Only you could get into trouble like this," he said, still chuckling. "Wait, I'll help you." I didn't know then that this help would lead to events that would change our relationship forever. Brian sat down next to the bed, still laughing at the situation. He smelled of the pool and fresh shower gel, probably from a shower after his workout. His hair was still damp, and his t-shirt was slightly stuck to his body. "Okay, let's see what we have here," he said, assessing the situation. "How did you manage to do this?" I explained about the book and the failed attempt at cleaning, feeling increasingly foolish. Brian tried to lift the bed, his muscles straining with the effort, but the structure barely moved. "Damn, this is harder than I thought," he breathed. "Wait, I have to think of something else." He sat beside me on the floor, leaning against the wall. I was still lying in the same uncomfortable position, feeling my whole body go numb. The situation was becoming more and more awkward. "You know," Brian said suddenly with that smile I knew all too well, "this reminds me of our old jokes." I felt his hand slide down my back, as if trying to reassure me. For some reason, this simple gesture made me shudder. Something changed in the room's atmosphere. The air seemed to become thicker. "Remember how we always teased each other?" He continued quietly, his voice sounding different. His words made me understand that something was wrong, after which he stood behind me and pulled my shorts off, lubricated the hole, and began to draw ovals and eights with his tool. As a result, we had crazy sex. When I finally crawled out from under the bed, there was a strange silence in the room. We both avoided looking at each other. I muttered something about needing to shower and hurried out of the room, feeling my face burning. I stood under the streams of water in the shower for a long time, trying to comprehend what had happened. What was that? How could it have happened? And most importantly, why did I want it to happen again? When I returned to my room, Brian had gone somewhere. It could have been for the best. I needed time to collect my thoughts. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how a routine cleaning had led to such an unexpected turn of events. The day was slowly ending, and I still couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Brian's touch, gaze, and voice had changed. Something had changed irreversibly between us, and I didn't know whether to be happy about it or afraid. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I lay on my bed, going over the last few hours' events in my head, trying to make sense of them. It was slowly getting dark outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his touch, the memory of how fast my heart was beating. Brian didn't come back until dinner. He was acting almost normal. He got food from the fridge, turned on his laptop, and pretended nothing had happened. But I noticed how sometimes he would glance at me quickly when he thought I wasn't looking. We sat in the room, each doing something, but the air was electric. I tried to read my art history notes, but the words blurred. All my thoughts returned to that moment under the bed. "Would you like some tea?" Brian asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice sounded casual, but I detected a hint of uncertainty in it. "Yes, thank you," I replied, sounding as casual as possible. He stood up to put the kettle on, and I couldn't help but watch his movements. How he reached for the mugs, how his t-shirt lifted slightly, revealing a strip of skin. I'd never noticed such details before, but now I couldn't take my eyes off them. We drank tea in awkward silence. We needed to discuss what had happened, but I couldn't find the words. How do you discuss something like that with someone you've known for 3 years? With whom do you share a room, secrets, and everyday trivia? It was getting late, and the tension in the room was growing. Every time our eyes accidentally met, I felt a shiver run through my body. The same question was spinning in my head. Would our friendship change now? And if so, how? I found myself thinking back to all our past interactions, playful scuffles, casual touches, evenings spent watching movies together. Maybe there had been something more back then? Something we both didn't notice or didn't want to notice? At some point, Brian got up and started getting ready for bed. I watched him take out his pajamas and make his bed. All these ordinary actions suddenly acquired some new meaning and became more intimate. "Good night," he said, turning off the light in his half of the room. "Good night," I replied, knowing I was unlikely to sleep. Lying in the dark, I listened to his breathing from across the room. It seemed uneven. It seemed he was awake, too. My thoughts were jumbled, and my heart was pounding like crazy. I knew something was about to happen. I could feel it in my whole body. The only question was which of us would make the first move. The clock showed almost midnight when I heard his bed creak. In the room's darkness, the only sounds were our breathing and the quiet hum of the laptop on the table. I lay there holding my breath when Brian rose from his bed. His steps were slow and careful, as if he wasn't sure what he was doing. I felt the mattress dip as he sat on the edge of my bed. I could make out his silhouette in the dim light from the street lamp. He was silent, just sitting there, and that silence seemed louder than any words. "Can't sleep?" I whispered, breaking the silence. "I can't stop thinking," he replied just as quietly, "about what happened this afternoon." His hand found mine in the darkness. The touch was light, almost weightless, but it sent shivers down my spine. I sat up in bed, facing him. "Brian!" I started, but he cut me off by pressing his finger to my lips. "Shh," he breathed. "No need to say anything." He started kissing me, and after that we had sex again. Afterward, we lay in silence, listening to our hearts beating. His hand lazily ran through my hair, and there was so much tenderness in this simple caress that it took my breath away. "What happens now?" I asked in a whisper, afraid to disturb the moment. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But I think it's right. What's happening between us?" I turned to him, trying to make out his face in the darkness. His eyes were shining, and there was a slight smile on his lips. He looked calm and confident, as if everything had fallen into place. "Stay," I said as he began to rise. He hesitated momentarily, then lay down again, his arms wrapped around me. His body was warm, familiar, and yet wholly new. We fell asleep like that, our limbs entwined, and I felt entirely at peace for the first time in a long time. The last thought before sleep was realizing that everything would be different tomorrow. But this thought was not frightening, but filled with anticipation. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds. The first thing I noticed was that Brian was not there. He was already up and, judging by the sounds, fiddling with the kettle in our makeshift kitchen. I opened my eyes to see him at the table, making breakfast like he had done hundreds of times before. He was wearing his usual shorts and a t-shirt, and his damp hair, sticking out in all directions from his morning run, looked so normal. "Good morning," he said, noticing that I was awake. There was no hint of embarrassment or awkwardness in his voice. "Would you like some toast?" I sat up in bed, wondering if I had dreamed everything that had happened that night. But the slight pain in my muscles and the memories were too real. "I will," I replied, watching him move around the room. Brian acted like he always did, joking, talking about his morning run, planning his day. But there was something new in how he sometimes glanced at me and casually touched me as he passed. "I have practice in an hour," he said, placing a plate of toast in front of me. "Then I have to go to the library. The essay won't write itself." I nodded, mentally preparing myself for a whole day alone with my thoughts. It could be for the best, time to think, to sort out my feelings. We had breakfast in the usual silence, but now it was different, filled with unspoken words and secret glances. I noticed how his fingers on his coffee cup trembled slightly, and he glanced at me furtively, thinking that I was not watching. As he got ready for practice, I watched his movements with new interest. The way he put his things in his gym bag, the way he pulled on his favorite sweatshirt, and the way he checked his phone suddenly meant so much more. "See you tonight?" he asked at the door, and I heard much more than words in that simple question. "Of course," I replied, feeling my heart beat faster. After he left, I was alone in the room, which now seemed completely different. Every corner held memories of the previous night. I looked at his bed and his things scattered around the room, and I knew that I could never again treat this as just a roommate's thing. The day dragged on. I tried to study, read, and even clean, this time without incident, but my thoughts kept returning to him, to his touch, to his smile, to the way he whispered my name in the dark. And somewhere deep inside, the anticipation of his return grew. A week has passed since that incident, but every time I pass by that bed, I feel my heart begin to beat faster. Our life has hardly changed outwardly. The same classes, Brian's training, the same evenings spent studying. But now it all has a new meaning. We didn't talk about what was going on between us. During the day, we were still roommates, friends who teased each other and shared cleaning duties. But when night came, when the door closed and we were alone, everything changed. I learned to notice details I hadn't seen before. The way Brian licks his lips when he's focused on studying. The way his muscles ripple under his shirt when he stretches. The way he looks at me when he thinks I don't notice, with the same hunger I do. Our casual touches now have a special meaning. When he passes by and casually touches my shoulder, or when I pass him a cup of coffee and our fingers brush, each moment sends electric shocks through my body. Here comes the part about romantic connection. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten stuck under the bed that day. If Brian hadn't come back at that exact moment. If we hadn't both decided to cross that line. But then I looked at him and saw his smile, which was meant only for me, and I knew everything happened precisely as it was supposed to. We don't know what's going to happen next, how long we can keep our secret, or if we should keep it at all. We don't know what will happen when the school year ends. But I've finally found what I've always been missing. As for cleaning, I'm much more careful with the beds now. Sometimes, when I catch Brian's eye, I think I should accidentally get stuck again. Who knows where it might lead this time? Every night, falling asleep to the sound of his breathing, I thank the chance that led to such changes in my life. And you know what? I don't regret anything. Absolutely nothing.